In the corporate world where spreadsheets and KPIs matter more than people, one decision about a year-end bonus can become the spark that burns down the careers of those who thought themselves untouchable. I never believed a simple piece of paper marked annual compensation review could lead to revenge on such a scale, until they denied me. They called it budget restructuring while executives collected seven-figure payouts. That was their first mistake. Their second was assuming I'd simply accept it. My name is Madison Cole. And until 3 weeks ago, I believed hard work actually meant something at Northbridge Dynamics. Funny how a single email can shatter illusions you didn't even know you were holding on to. I'd been staring at my monitor for 12 straight hours that December evening, finalizing the quarterly sustainability report that would make our executives look like environmental saints to the board. My eyes burned from the screen's blue light, but I pushed through. The bonus announcement was coming any day now. And after the year I'd had, 60-hour weeks, canceled vacations, missed birthdays, I knew it would be worth it. The email arrived at 4:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Compensation update, action required. My heart actually skipped when I saw it. I'd already done the math. With the promised performance bonus, I could finally pay off my student loans, maybe even put a down payment on something that wasn't a studio apartment 40 minutes from downtown Riverton. Dear team member, it began. Not even my name. After 3 years of bleeding myself dry for this company, I was a generic team member. Due to necessary fiscal restructuring and market volatility, we regret to inform you that performance bonuses for levels 1 to 7 employees have been suspended for this fiscal year. We understand this may cause disappointment, but we trust you'll understand that these decisions ensure Northbridge's continued competitive position. I read it 3 times. The words didn't change. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the rest of the corporate doublespeak. They thanked us for our continued dedication and assured us that future compensation packages would reflect market conditions. The signature at the bottom belonged to Richard Brennan, our CFO, whose new Tesla I'd seen in the executive parking garage just that morning. You okay, Madison? I looked up to see Jerome from IT standing by my cubicle, concern creasing his face. Word traveled fast in our floor's cube farm. Did you get the email? I asked, though his expression already gave me the answer. We all did, every non-executive in the building. He laughed bitterly. But hey, at least the company's competitive position is secure, right? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the procurement reports I'd compiled, the ones showing our executives business dinners at restaurants where appetizers cost more than my weekly groceries. I thought about the Sustainability Award ceremony last month, where Brennan had stood at a podium talking about shared sacrifice and collective responsibility while wearing a watch worth more than my annual rent. The next morning, the real insult came. Someone had leaked an internal memo to the whole company, probably someone as angry as I was. The executive bonus pool hadn't just survived the fiscal restructuring, it had grown by 40%. Brennan himself was taking home $2.8 million. The CEO, Patricia Hartley, was getting nearly double that. I sat at my desk, staring at the sustainability report I'd been so proud of just days before. Every metric, every carefully crafted paragraph about our commitment to stakeholder value felt like a mockery. My computer screen reflected my face back at me, hollow eyes, clenched jaw, the look of someone who'd just realized they'd been played. Madison, Hartley's assistant, appeared beside me. Mrs. Hartley would like to see you in the executive conference room. My stomach dropped. Had they somehow sensed my rage? As I walked through the halls lined with those inspirational posters about excellence and integrity, I wondered if they were firing me for the crime of expecting fairness. But when I entered the conference room, Hartley barely looked up from her phone. Madison, excellent work on the ESG report. The board was impressed. I'm putting you in charge of the full annual sustainability audit. It's a big responsibility, but I know you're up for it. More work, more responsibility, same pay, no bonus. Thank you for the opportunity, I heard myself say. The words, automatic, hollow. As I walked back to my desk, something inside me had shifted. They wanted to play games with our livelihoods while preaching about environmental, social, and governance responsibility. Fine. But they'd forgotten something crucial. I wasn't just writing those ESG reports. I had access to the real data behind them. Every covered-up spill, every fudged emission number, every worker safety violation that had been buried in subcommittee meetings. They'd refused my bonus. They'd insulted my intelligence. But worst of all, they'd given me the keys to their kingdom without realizing it. That was their third mistake. It would be their last. The cracks in Northbridge's facade weren't hard to find once you knew where to look. They were everywhere, hidden in plain sight behind password-protected folders and bureaucratic doublespeak. 3 weeks into my new role as head of the annual sustainability audit, I'd already uncovered enough to make my stomach turn. The executive floor might have been all glass walls and talk of transparency, but the company's actual operations were buried under layers of shell companies, third-party contractors, and NDAs thick enough to choke on. Madison, you're here late again. I looked up from my screen to see Travis Kumar, one of the few engineers who still had a conscience in this place. It was past 9 p.m., and the office was nearly empty except for the cleaning crew and workaholics like us. Just reviewing the Riverside facility emissions data, I said carefully. You never knew who was listening in this place. Travis glanced around, then leaned closer. The real data or the data? That's when I knew I wasn't alone in seeing through the bullshit. What do you know about Riverside? He pulled up a chair. I know that what we report to the EPA and what's actually coming out of those smokestacks are two very different numbers. I also know that the groundwater contamination we remediated last year is still spreading. The local community has no idea what's seeping into their wells. Riverside was a low-income neighborhood 30 miles south of Riverton. Predominantly Black and Hispanic families who'd been promised good jobs when Northbridge built the facility. Instead, they got minimum wage positions and cancer clusters. How long have you known? I asked. 2 years. I tried reporting it through proper channels, got told it was being addressed at the appropriate level. Then I got transferred to a different division with a nice little raise to keep me quiet. His jaw tightened. I took the money. I'm not proud of it. Over the next few days, Travis and I began sharing information. He had the technical data, actual emission readings, safety violations, equipment failures that were never reported. I had access to the financial side, the money saved by skipping environmental controls, the bribes disguised as consulting fees to local officials, the millions spent on PR firms to maintain our green energy leader image. The most damning discovery came from a folder innocuously labeled Community Outreach Initiatives. Inside were records of Northbridge's systematic efforts to silence whistleblowers. There were payoffs, legal threats, and in one case, a former employee who tried to go public about toxic waste dumping had mysteriously lost her new job after Northbridge made some calls. But it was the company all-hands meeting that really showed me who we were dealing with. Hartley stood at the podium, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, designer suit impeccable. Behind her, a PowerPoint proclaimed, Northbridge, leading the green revolution. I'm proud to announce that we've been nominated for the National Corporate Responsibility Award, she beamed. This recognition reflects our unwavering commitment to ESG principles and stakeholder value. The room erupted in obligatory applause. I clapped too, playing my part while bile rose in my throat. Of course, Hartley continued. Leadership requires tough decisions. The recent compensation adjustments were necessary to ensure we can continue our environmental initiatives. I know many of you were disappointed. But your sacrifice enables us to invest in what really matters, our planet's future. Our sacrifice? She said it with a straight face while wearing jewelry worth more than most of us made in a year. After the meeting, I overheard Brennan on a call in the hallway. He thought he was alone. No, the quarterly numbers are solid. We cut labor costs by 15% with the bonus cancellation. Yes, my personal compensation package is secured. The ESG narrative is playing well with investors. They don't need to know about Riverside. Madison Cole, she's handling the audit. Smart girl, but a true believer. She'll write whatever we need. A true believer. They thought I was their puppet. dancing to their strings while they destroyed communities and counted their millions. That night, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by printed documents I'd smuggled out. Each page was a testament to Northbridge's hypocrisy. They preached environmental responsibility while poisoning groundwater. They celebrated diversity while paying women and minorities 30% less. They claimed transparency while operating a web of offshore accounts to hide regulatory violations. The weight of it all was crushing. This wasn't just about my denied bonus anymore. It was about the families in Riverside drinking contaminated water. It was about my colleagues working themselves to death for a company that saw them as expendable. It was about a system so broken that the people destroying the planet got rewarded while those trying to save it got scraps. I picked up a photo from Riverside, children playing in a park, unaware of the toxic waste buried beneath their feet. Northbridge's logo gleamed on a sponsorship sign in the background. They thought they were untouchable, protected by lawyers, lobbyists, and legislation they'd helped write. But they'd made one crucial error. They'd taught me exactly how their game worked, then given me a reason to flip the board. The ESG nightmare they'd created was about to become their reality. The transformation from victim to architect of revenge didn't happen overnight. It was a slow burn, each discovered lie adding fuel to a fire I couldn't extinguish even if I wanted to. I started documenting everything, every falsified report, every deleted email I recovered from backup servers, every discrepancy between what we told regulators and what actually happened. My apartment became a war room. External hard drives hidden in cereal boxes, encrypted files on cloud servers accessed through VPNs, physical documents photographed and stored in multiple locations. Paranoid? Maybe. But I'd seen what happened to whistleblowers who weren't careful. The internal conflict was eating me alive. During the day, I played the perfect employee, nodding along in meetings, praising our green initiatives, writing reports that made our executives look like environmental champions. At night, I lay awake wrestling with what I was becoming. Was I really going to throw away my career, possibly my freedom, for revenge? The answer came on a Thursday morning when Sarah Martinez cleared out her desk. Sarah had been with Northbridge for 8 years, single mother, 2 kids, never missed a deadline. She'd been counting on her bonus to cover her daughter's medical bills. The girl had type 1 diabetes, and even with our supposedly excellent health insurance, the costs were crushing. Budget constraints, she said bitterly, throwing her personal items into a cardboard box. They're eliminating my position. Funny how there's no budget constraints when Hartley needs a new corporate jet. I watched her walk out, shoulders straight but eyes red, and something inside me crystallized. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. You okay? Travis appeared beside me, watching Sarah's exit. No, I said quietly. I'm not okay, and I'm done pretending to be. That weekend, I made my decision. I pulled out everything I'd collected and began organizing it into a comprehensive package. But I needed more than just documents. I needed irrefutable proof, the kind that couldn't be dismissed as misunderstandings or isolated incidents. I started recording conversations. Legal in our state with one-party consent. I checked. Brennan was particularly careless, often discussing sensitive matters in the elevator or hallways, assuming his underlings were either deaf or irrelevant. The Riverside situation is contained. I recorded him saying to another executive, "The EPA inspector has been handled, cost us $200K, but it's better than the alternative. Imagine if they found out about the benzene levels." Benzene, a known carcinogen. And they knew. The moral weight of what I was carrying grew heavier each day. I'd always thought of myself as a good person, someone who played by the rules, believed in the system. But what do you do when the system is designed to protect the very people destroying it? My breaking point came during a strategy session about our upcoming sustainability report. I was presenting data on our carbon offset programs, all legitimate on paper, all completely meaningless in practice. We were essentially paying companies in developing countries to not cut down forests they were never going to cut down anyway. "Excellent work, Madison," Hartley said. This will play very well with the board. Can you emphasize the Indigenous community partnership angle? Investors love that. Of course, I replied, my voice steady even as my hands clenched under the table. Should I include the part where we're actively polluting their water sources, or keep that in the appendix? The room went silent. I'd said it. Out loud. Hartley's smile never wavered, but her eyes went cold. I think you misunderstand the situation. Madison, we're in full compliance with all regulations. The regulations we helped write, I said, surprising myself with my boldness. The ones with loopholes big enough to drive a tanker truck full of toxic waste through. Perhaps you need some time off, Brennan interjected smoothly. The stress of the new position seems to be affecting your judgment. That's when I knew my time was running out. They'd started to see me as a threat, not just an annoyance. If I was going to act, it had to be soon. That night, I made copies of everything. 3 complete sets of documents, recordings, emails, financial records. One for safekeeping, one for insurance, and one that would soon find its way to people who could do something with it. I stood in my apartment, looking at the boxes containing 3 years of evidence, 3 years of lies, 3 years of destruction wrapped in green marketing. My old self, the eager young analyst who joined Northbridge believing she could make a difference, would have been horrified at what I was about to do. But that woman had been killed by a 2-paragraph email denying her a bonus she'd earned. What stood in her place was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous to the empire built on lies. They'd created me through their greed and callousness. Now they were going to face the consequences of their creation. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number Travis had given me. A journalist who'd been investigating corporate environmental crimes for years. My thumb hovered over the call button. Once I pressed it, there would be no going back. Madison Cole, the good employee, the team player, the true believer, would cease to exist. I pressed call. This is Madison Cole from Northbridge Dynamics, I said when she answered. I have a story you're going to want to hear. The journalist's name was Diana Walsh, and she had the kind of reputation that made corporate lawyers wake up in cold sweats. We met at a diner 40 miles outside Riverton, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that could strip paint. You're taking a huge risk, Diana said, reviewing the documents I'd brought, just a sample of what I had. Her eyes widened as she flipped through pages. This is... Jesus Christ, Madison, this is systemic. That's just the tip of the iceberg, I said, wrapping my hands around my coffee mug to stop them from shaking. I have recordings, financial documents, proof of bribery, evidence of cover-ups going back 5 years. Diana leaned back, studying me. Why now? What changed? I thought about Sarah Martinez, about the families in Riverside, about my denied bonus that had started this journey. I realized I was part of the machine. Every report I wrote, every data set I cleaned up, I was helping them destroy lives while looking virtuous. I can't do it anymore. You know they'll come after you. These people don't play nice when billions are at stake. I know. And I did. I'd already noticed strange cars in my neighborhood, my work computer acting sluggish like someone was monitoring it. That's why I need allies. Diana nodded slowly. I've been tracking Northbridge for 3 years, but I've never had an inside source. With what you're offering, we could expose everything. But I'll need more than just me. This is bigger than one story. That's when she introduced me to Marcus Thompson. Marcus was nothing like what I expected from a former Northbridge employee. Where I was anxious energy and barely contained rage, he was calm, methodical, with the kind of quiet intensity that came from carrying anger for so long it had crystallized into purpose. They destroyed my team, he said simply when we met at Diana's secure office. I was the lead engineer at Riverside. When I raised concerns about the benzene leaks, they didn't just fire me. They blacklisted me, made sure I couldn't work in the industry again. My wife left, took the kids, said I'd become obsessed. Were you? I asked. Yes, he said without hesitation. How do you not become obsessed when you know people are dying and everyone pretends it's normal? Marcus had something I didn't: technical proof. Soil samples he'd collected before his termination, photographs of illegal waste disposal, even a recording of Brennan explicitly ordering him to falsify safety reports. "I've been waiting 3 years for someone like you," he told me. "Someone still on the inside who could connect the dots." We formed an unlikely alliance. Diana would handle the media strategy, using her network of investigative journalists to ensure the story couldn't be buried. Marcus provided technical expertise and historical context. And I was the bridge, still employed, still trusted enough to access new information even as I felt the walls closing in. The paranoia was justified. 2 weeks after my first meeting with Diana, I was called into HR. "Madison, we've noticed some unusual activity on your computer," the HR director said, her smile sharp as glass. "Accessing files outside your department, downloading large amounts of data. Can you explain?" I'd prepared for this. "I'm conducting the comprehensive sustainability audit Mrs. Hartley requested. It requires cross-departmental analysis." "Of course, but perhaps you could keep us informed of what you need. We want to ensure you have proper support." Translation: "We're watching you." That night, I met with Diana and Marcus. "They're on to me. We need to move faster." "We need one more piece," Diana insisted. "Something current, undeniable, that ties directly to the executives. The historical stuff is damning, but they'll claim it was previous management, lessons learned, all that corporate rehabilitation bullshit." Marcus leaned forward. "The shareholder meeting, it's in 2 weeks. They'll be presenting the new Riverside expansion plan." "What expansion?" I hadn't heard anything about this. "They're planning to double the facility's capacity, more jobs for the community, they'll say. What they won't mention is that it'll triple the toxic output. I still have contacts there. The permits they're filing are fraudulent. They're using shell companies to hide the real environmental impact." "Can you get proof?" Diana asked. "I can do better than that," I said, feeling a plan form. "I can get them to admit it. Hartley wants me to prepare a presentation for the board about our ESG achievements. I'll be in the room when they discuss the expansion." "That's suicide," Marcus said flatly. "Once you're in that boardroom, you're trapped." "Maybe. Or maybe it's exactly where I need to be." Diana was already typing on her laptop. "If we time this right, we can have the story ready to break the moment you get what we need. Multiple outlets, simultaneous publication. They won't be able to suppress it all." "What about legal protection for Madison?" Marcus asked. "I've got a whistleblower attorney on standby," Diana said. "Pro bono. She loves cases like this." I stood up, looking at my unlikely allies. A disgraced engineer, a muckraking journalist, and me, a corporate analyst who'd finally woken up. We were David against Goliath, if David had insider knowledge and Goliath's own weapons. 2 weeks, I said. In 2 weeks, we bring them down. Marcus raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. To Northbridge's ESG nightmare. Diana smiled grimly. To justice. I raised my own cup, thinking of Sarah Martini's, of the families in Riverside, of everyone who'd been crushed under Northbridge's wheel of greed. To revenge, I said quietly. We drank our bitter coffee, conspirators united in purpose, knowing that in 2 weeks, everything would change. The only question was whether we'd survive the explosion we were about to detonate. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Use Northbridge's own ESG language as a weapon against them. Every sustainability report they'd published, every green initiative they'd trumpeted, every environmental pledge they'd made would become evidence of their hypocrisy. I spent the next week crafting the perfect presentation for the board meeting. On the surface, it was everything Hartley wanted. Glossy charts showing our industry-leading environmental metrics, heartwarming stories of community engagement, projections that painted Northbridge as the future of responsible energy. But embedded throughout were subtle traps. Data points that, when compared to the real numbers Marcus and I had collected, would reveal the lies. References to specific facilities and dates that corresponded to our evidence of violations. It was a presentation designed to make them comfortable enough to speak freely, believing they were among friends. Meanwhile, Diana orchestrated a media symphony. She'd assembled a coalition of journalists from the Wall Street Journal, ProPublica, The Guardian, and several environmental watchdog sites. Each would receive different pieces of the story, ensuring comprehensive coverage that couldn't be silenced with a single legal threat. "We're calling it the ESG files," Diana told me during a clandestine meeting. "Has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" The evidence packages were devastating. Marcus had obtained recent soil samples from Riverside showing benzene levels 300 times the legal limit. I'd documented $3.2 million in bribes to EPA officials, disguised as consulting fees. We had recordings of executives laughing about greenwashing idiots who believed their carbon offset programs. But the masterpiece was the shell company network. Northbridge had created 17 different entities to obscure their environmental violations. They'd shift toxic waste between companies on paper, making it disappear from regulatory oversight. One company would report clean operations while another, technically separate but wholly owned, dumped mercury into groundwater. "This is RICO-level stuff," Diana's legal contact had said. "If the DOJ gets involved, people are going to prison." 3 days before the board meeting, things escalated. I arrived at my apartment to find my door slightly ajar. Nothing was missing, but everything had been touched. A message. I called Diana from a burner phone. "They searched my place. Are you safe?" "For now. But they're getting desperate." "Good. Desperate people make mistakes." She was right. The next day, Brennan cornered me in the parking garage. "Madison, we need to talk." His usual smooth demeanor was cracked, showing something uglier underneath. "I know what you're doing. Whatever you think you found, you're misunderstanding it. You're a smart woman. Don't throw your life away over some misguided crusade." "Is that a threat, Richard?" "It's a reality check. You have no idea how deep this goes, who you're really fighting against. We're not just a company, we're an institution. We have friends in every regulatory body, every major media outlet, every courthouse. You can't win." I looked him straight in the eye. "Maybe not, but I can make you lose." His face darkened. "Last chance, Madison. Stop this now, and we'll make it worth your while. 7 figures, cash, tax-free. All you have to do is walk away." 7 figures. More money than I'd see in a decade of denied bonuses. For a moment, I felt the temptation. Then I thought about the kids in Riverside playing on poisoned ground. Go to hell, Richard. The day before the board meeting, we released the first wave. Diana's network published synchronized exposés at exactly 6 a.m. Eastern. Corporate karma started trending within an hour. The stories were careful to mention that more revelations were coming, that this was just the beginning. Northbridge's stock dropped 12% by market close. That evening, Hartley called an emergency all-hands meeting. She stood at the podium, no longer the composed executive, but a general rallying troops. "These accusations are baseless attacks on our company's reputation," she declared. "We've been targeted by radical environmental activists and disgruntled former employees. We will defend ourselves vigorously and emerge stronger." I sat in the audience, my presentation for tomorrow's board meeting loaded on my laptop. She had no idea that the real attack hadn't even begun. Travis found me after the meeting. "Madison, they know it's you. Security has been asking questions. Let them ask. After tomorrow, it won't matter." That night, I couldn't sleep. I reviewed my presentation one last time, checked in with Diana and Marcus, and prepared for what might be my last day at Northbridge. I'd transformed their ESG narrative into a confession, turned their greatest PR asset into their biggest liability. The hashtag, corporate karma, had evolved beyond our control. Employees from other companies were sharing their own stories of corporate hypocrisy. Environmental groups were organizing protests at Northbridge facilities. The momentum was building, and tomorrow's board meeting would be the crescendo. I looked at myself in the mirror. The eager young analyst who joined Northbridge 3 years ago was gone. In her place stood someone harder, someone who understood that sometimes the only way to fight a corrupt system was to use its own tools against it. Tomorrow, I would walk into that boardroom with a presentation that celebrated Northbridge's ESG achievements. And by the time I walked out, their empire of lies would be in flames. The ESG nightmare we'd crafted was about to become their waking reality. They'd created this weapon themselves with every false report, every covered-up violation, every community they'd poisoned while preaching sustainability. All I had to do was pull the trigger. The boardroom on the 42nd floor was a monument to corporate excess, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Riverton, a table made from a single piece of Brazilian rosewood, chairs that cost more than most people's cars. I arrived early, setting up my presentation while my hands trembled slightly. Board members filed in, 11 faces I recognized from annual reports and business magazines. These were the people who'd gotten rich while Riverside choked on benzene. Hartley entered last, her eyes finding mine with a look that could have frozen hell. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "before we discuss the Riverside expansion, Madison Cole will present our ESG achievements for this quarter." I stood, clicking to my first slide, a beautiful graphic showing Northbridge's commitment to sustainability. "Thank you, Mrs. Hartley. Today, I want to showcase how Northbridge has redefined what environmental responsibility means in the energy sector." For 20 minutes, I played their game perfectly. I showed charts of our carbon offset programs, images of smiling communities we'd partnered with, statistics showing our industry-leading safety record. The board members nodded approvingly, relaxing into their chairs. Then Hartley made her mistake. "Excellent work, Madison. This perfectly positions us for the Riverside expansion. Richard, why don't you share the details?" Brennan pulled up his own presentation. "The expansion will create 400 jobs and increase our processing capacity by 300%. We've already secured the permits through our subsidiary partnerships." "The community impact studies?" asked one board member. "Favorable." Brennan lied smoothly. "The locals are eager for the economic opportunity." I raised my hand. "Actually, I have some relevant data on that." Hartley's eyes narrowed, but she couldn't stop me without looking suspicious to the board. I clicked to a slide I'd hidden in my presentation. "This shows our current Riverside impact metrics." The chart looked positive at first glance, but I'd included the real numbers in tiny footnotes. "As you can see, we're already operating at maximum environmental capacity. Any expansion would require us to exceed federal limits. That's been addressed through our regulatory partnerships," Brennan said quickly. "You mean the $3.2 million in consulting fees to EPA officials?" I asked innocently. The room went silent. "I'm sorry," I continued, clicking to another hidden slide. "I meant to say our regulatory compliance investments. Though I'm curious about these 17 shell companies we're using to distribute waste processing, it seems unnecessarily complex for legitimate operations." Hartley stood. "Madison, I think—" "Oh, I'm not done." I clicked again. "This is interesting. Our reported benzene levels versus what our internal testing shows. Quite a discrepancy. Almost like we're maintaining two sets of books." The board members were no longer relaxed. Several were pulling out phones, probably checking the stock price as Northbridge's corporate karma continued trending. "Security," Hartley said into her phone. "Conference room A, now." But I kept going. "This next slide shows our community investment in Riverside, $2 million years in parks and schools. Generous, until you consider the $400 million in medical costs from contamination-related illnesses that we've successfully avoided through legal technicalities." "You're fired," Brennan snarled. "You're done." "Oh, I've been done for weeks," I said, pulling out my phone. "By the way, this entire meeting has been recorded. Legal in this state," I checked. "Diana, are you getting this?" Diana's voice came through the speaker. "Every word, Madison. So are 12 major news outlets." The door burst open, security rushing in, but board members were already standing, some heading for exits, others on phones with lawyers. One elderly member, Walter Cross, who'd been with the company for 30 years, remained seated, his face ashen. Is it true? He asked quietly. The benzene, the communities, all of it? Every word, I said as security grabbed my arms. Check the footnotes in my presentation. Check the real data. It's all there. As they dragged me toward the door, Hartley grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging in. You've destroyed yourself for nothing, she hissed. We'll bury you in legal fees. You'll never work again. Maybe, I said. But neither will you. The elevator ride down with security felt like descending from Olympus, leaving the gods to deal with the chaos I'd unleashed. My phone buzzed constantly. Diana confirming the recording was live streaming. Marcus texting that protesters were gathering outside. News alerts showing Northbridge stock in freefall. In the lobby, reporters were already assembled, cameras rolling. Security tried to hustle me out the back, but I broke free, walking straight toward the press. Madison Cole, someone shouted. Is it true you just exposed Northbridge's environmental crimes to their board? I looked directly into the nearest camera. Everything Northbridge told you about their commitment to ESG was a lie. The evidence is public now. Check the ESG files, the truth about Riverside, about the bribes, about the poisoned communities. It's all there. What about the expansion? Another reporter called. There won't be an expansion. There won't be much of anything once the DOJ sees what we've documented. Security finally pulled me away, but the damage was done. By the time they deposited me on the sidewalk with a cardboard box of my belongings. Corporate karma wasn't just trending, it was a movement. Other whistleblowers were coming forward. Environmental groups were filing lawsuits. The SEC announced an investigation. I stood there, unemployed. Probably unemployable, definitely about to be sued, watching the empire crumble in real time on my phone. Diana had released everything. The documents, the recordings, the evidence of decades of environmental crimes. Northbridge Dynamics, the company that had denied me a $15,000 bonus to save money, was about to lose billions. The ESG nightmare had begun. The next 72 hours were a masterclass in corporate destruction. I watched from my apartment, glued to multiple screens, as Northbridge Dynamics learned what happens when decades of lies collapse all at once. Day 1. Trading was halted 3 times as the stock price plummeted 40%. The SEC announced a formal investigation. The EPA issued emergency cease and desist orders for all Northbridge facilities. Hartley went on CNN, her usually perfect composure cracking as she tried to claim I was a disgruntled employee spreading falsified information. The interviewer simply pulled up the documents we'd released, asking her to explain the 17 shell companies. She walked off the set. Day 2. The Department of Justice launched a criminal investigation. 3 board members resigned. Brennan was photographed being escorted from his home by federal agents, his Tesla left abandoned in the driveway. The Riverside community filed a class action lawsuit seeking $2 billion in damages. Someone leaked internal emails showing executives calling their own investors useful idiots who'll believe any green bullshit we feed them. Day 3. Congress announced hearings. Hartley was subpoenaed. The company's credit rating was downgraded to junk status. International partners began severing ties. The Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, which had invested heavily based on Northbridge's ESG rating, announced complete divestment. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I sat in my apartment, unemployed and exhausted, watching the empire burn with a strange emptiness. Diana called constantly with updates. Marcus sent congratulations. But all I could think about was how this had started. With a denied bonus and the realization that hard work meant nothing to these people. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Miss Cole, this is Walter Cross. The board member who'd asked if it was all true. I know you have no reason to trust me, he continued. But I need you to know that not all of us knew. Some of us actually believed the ESG reports. We were deceived too. You were paid not to look too closely, I said flatly. Yes, he admitted. We were. And that's why I'm calling. I'm leading a shareholder revolt. We're removing the entire C-suite, bringing in federal monitors, and implementing real environmental controls. We need someone who understands what really happened. Someone with credibility with both regulators and the public. You're offering me a job? After everything? I'm offering you the chance to help fix what you exposed. Chief Compliance Officer, reporting directly to the new board. Full authority to implement real ESG standards. The salary is substantial. I almost laughed. After all this, they wanted to hire me back. I'll think about it, I said, and hung up. The next morning, I was summoned to Congress. The hearing room was packed, cameras everywhere. I sat at the witness table, looking up at senators who'd probably taken Northbridge donations, prepared to tell the truth one more time. But first, they brought in Hartley. She looked diminished, her designer suit unable to hide the defeat in her posture. As she raised her hand to take the oath, our eyes met. The hatred there was pure, undiluted. But underneath it, I saw something else, fear. Real, bone-deep fear. Mrs. Hartley? The committee chair began. Did you knowingly mislead investors about Northbridge's environmental practices? On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. She repeated that phrase 47 times over the next hour, each refusal another nail in Northbridge's coffin. When my turn came, I didn't invoke anything, I told them everything. The falsified reports, the bribes, the communities destroyed for profit. I showed them photos from Riverside, children with respiratory diseases, corrupted groundwater, dead wildlife. I played recordings of executives laughing about their lies. Miss Cole, one senator asked, why did you risk everything to expose this? I thought about the real answer, that it started with rage over a denied bonus. But that seemed too small now, too personal for what this had become. Because someone had to, I said simply. Because corporations like Northbridge have turned ESG into a marketing tool while destroying the planet. Because the people of Riverside deserved better. Because my colleagues who worked themselves to death deserved better. Because the system that's supposed to protect us has been corrupted by the very people poisoning us. The senator nodded. What would you recommend this committee do? Make it criminal, not civil, criminal. Put executives in prison when they knowingly poison communities. Make the fines bigger than the profits, and require real, verified environmental reporting, not the self-regulated fiction we have now. 3 hours later, I walked out of the Capitol to find hundreds of protesters cheering. They held signs saying, "Thank you, Madison," and "Corporate karma is real." Someone started chanting, "ESG nightmare," and soon the whole crowd joined in. Diana found me in the chaos. "You did it," she said. "You actually did it." "We did it," I corrected. That evening, the news broke. Hartley and Brennan had been arrested on federal racketeering charges. Northbridge's stock was delisted. The company would be broken up and sold, with proceeds going to victim compensation. I stood by the Potomac River, watching the sun set over Washington, thinking about another river, the one in Riverton where this all started. The water here was cleaner. But I knew that across the country, in places like Riverside, the fight was just beginning. My phone rang. Walter Cross again. "Have you considered my offer?" I looked at the river, thinking about all the Northbridges out there, all the companies hiding behind ESG rhetoric while poisoning the world. "I'll take the job," I said, "but we do it my way, real change, real accountability." "Agreed." As I hung up, I realized something. They'd refused my bonus, denied me $15,000 I'd earned. In response, I'd cost them $15 billion and counting. The revenge was complete. The nightmare they'd created had consumed them. But the real work, the work of building something better from the ashes, was just beginning. 6 months later, I stood in the empty executive conference room on the 42nd floor, the same room where I detonated my truth bomb. The Brazilian rosewood table was gone, sold to pay victim settlements. The designer chairs, the excessive artwork, all liquidated. Only the windows remained, still offering that commanding view of Riverton. But I wasn't here for nostalgia. I was here to watch. Down below, demolition crews were preparing to implode the Riverside facility. After extensive testing revealed the contamination was too severe for remediation, the only solution was complete destruction and decades of cleanup. The implosion was scheduled for noon, symbolic. The new board had decided, a clear break from the past. Marcus stood beside me, now head of environmental remediation. You know, they found benzene levels that were actually higher than what we reported. We underestimated how bad it was. They always do, Diana said from behind us. She'd won a Pulitzer for the ESG files expose and was writing a book about the whole ordeal. The reality is always worse than even the whistleblowers know. We stood in silence, three people who'd brought down an empire, watching the final piece prepare to fall. Any regrets? Marcus asked me. I thought about it. The lawsuits from Northbridge's lawyers had been dismissed. The death threats had eventually stopped. I'd testified in 7 different trials, watching Hartley and Brennan get sentenced to federal prison, 15 years for her, 12 for him. The bonus I'd been denied seemed like ancient history now, a match that had lit a wildfire. No, I said finally, no regrets. At exactly noon, the charges detonated. The Riverside facility, that monument to corporate greed and environmental destruction, collapsed in on itself in a cloud of dust and debris. The crowd that had gathered, many of them Riverside residents who'd suffered for years, erupted in cheers. But I didn't cheer. I just watched the dust settle, thinking about everything that had led to this moment, a denied bonus, a few honest people brave enough to speak truth, a hashtag that became a movement. Sometimes that's all it takes to bring down giants, someone willing to say enough. My phone buzzed. Another company had reached out, wanting help establishing authentic ESG practices. Since the Northbridge collapse, I'd become something of a corporate conscience for hire, helping companies avoid becoming the next #disaster. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who'd destroyed a company for its ESG lies was now paid handsomely to prevent others from following the same path. I should go, I said. New client meeting. The pharmaceutical company, Diana asked. I heard they're nervous about their clinical trial data. They should be, I said. But if they're smart, they'll listen to me instead of their lawyers. As I walked through the building one last time, I passed the cubicle farm where I'd once spent 60-hour weeks crafting lies disguised as reports. New people sat there now, employees of the various companies that had bought Northbridge's salvageable assets. They looked young, eager, full of the same optimism I'd once had. I wanted to warn them, don't trust too much, don't believe the mission statements, don't expect fairness. But I knew they'd have to learn those lessons themselves. Outside, protesters had been replaced by environmental cleanup crews. The media circus had moved on to the next scandal. Corporate karma still trended occasionally, usually when another whistleblower came forward somewhere else, inspired by what we'd done. Sarah Martinez was waiting by my car. She'd gotten her job back with one of the successor companies, with full benefits and the bonus she'd been denied. Her daughter's medical bills were covered by the Victim Compensation Fund. Madison, she said, I never got to properly thank you. You don't need to. Yes, I do. You lost everything to give us justice. That takes a kind of courage I don't have. I didn't lose everything, I said, thinking about it. I lost a job at a company that didn't value me. I lost faith in a system that was already broken. I lost the ability to stay silent when I see injustice. Those aren't really losses. She hugged me. And then I got in my car and drove away from the Northbridge building for the last time. The Riverton River stretched out beside the highway, its water running clearer now that the facility had stopped pumping poison into it. Environmental scientists said it would take 20 years to fully recover. 20 years to undo the damage that had made a handful of executives obscenely wealthy. But it would recover. The Earth always does. Eventually, if we give it the chance. I pulled over at the same spot where I'd stood contemplating my revenge all those months ago. The water flowed past, indifferent to human drama, carrying away the remnants of what had been. No monument would mark what had happened here. No plaque would commemorate the communities poisoned, the lives destroyed, the justice finally served. But somewhere in Riverside, children were playing in parks that were finally safe. Somewhere in boardrooms across the country, executives were reconsidering their ESG lies, afraid of becoming the next Northbridge. Somewhere, another Madison Cole was gathering evidence, preparing to speak truth to power. The sun was setting, painting the river gold. I stood there, no longer the naive analyst who'd believed in corporate fairy tales, no longer the furious employee who'd been denied her worth, no longer even the whistleblower who'd brought down an empire. I was just Madison Cole, standing by a river, watching the water flow toward tomorrow. The fire I'd started had burned everything to the ground. The company, the executives, even the person I used to be. But from those ashes, something new was growing. Not redemption, not forgiveness, but something harder and more necessary. Accountability. They'd refused my bonus, so I'd activated their nightmare. And in the end, that was justice enough. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate karma and justice served cold. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this tale of revenge resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts on Madison's journey. What would you have done in her position? Let me know in the comments.